Got home on a Tuesday. Nobody knew I was coming. I'd been working the offshore platform for 11 weeks straight. Gulf of Mexico, out past Morgan City, Louisiana, and the rotation was supposed to run another 3 weeks. But there was a gas line issue in Sector 4, and they sent half our crew back early while maintenance came in. I didn't call ahead. I figured I'd just walk in, drop my bag, maybe surprise my wife with dinner. The house was quiet in a way that didn't feel right. Not the quiet of nobody home, the quiet of something missing. I stood in the kitchen for a minute, just listening. My wife's car was in the driveway. The TV was off. I called her name and she came out of the bedroom looking like she hadn't expected to see me for another 3 weeks, which, of course, she hadn't. She hugged me, asked if I was hungry. I said I was fine. Then, I said the thing I always say first when I come home. "Where's Lena?" My daughter was 16. She'd been staying with my sister-in-law, my wife's older sister, Roberta, out in central Tennessee while I was on rotation. That had been the plan. My wife had taken a temporary job in Nashville for the summer. 45 minutes from home, and the hours were long. She didn't want Lena alone in the house all day. Roberta had a place out in a small town called Corbin's Creek. Had some land, a farmhouse, said she'd be happy to have Lena for the summer. Lena was a good kid. Responsible. She'd be fine. That's what we told ourselves. My wife looked at me when I asked where Lena was, and something crossed her face that I didn't like. Not guilt, exactly. More like she'd been waiting for me to ask that question and dreading it at the same time. "She's still at Roberta's," she said. "It's August," I said. "School starts in 2 weeks." "I know, I've been meaning to call Roberta about that." "Meaning to call," I said. The way she said it. Meaning to call, like she'd been putting it off. Like there was something she'd been not quite wanting to deal with. I stood there for a second and I felt something in my chest tighten. The way it does, sometimes out on the rig. When a pressure reading comes back wrong and you know something's off, before anyone can tell you what. I asked her when she'd last spoken to Lena. She said, maybe 10 days ago. 10 days. Lena was 16. We had a rule in our house, always had, that she called one of us every 2 or 3 days at most, no matter where she was. That was the deal. That was the expectation. She was a good kid, and she'd never broken that rule once in her life. Not once. 10 days, I said again. My wife started to explain something about how Roberta had mentioned Lena, was keeping busy, and maybe the cell signal was poor out there, and she'd been meaning to follow up. I wasn't listening anymore. I was already walking to the bedroom to get my keys. I drove 5 hours that night, left at 7:30, stopped once for gas and coffee somewhere outside of Cookeville, and pulled off the main highway onto the county road that led to Roberta's property, a little before 1 in the morning. I'd been to the farmhouse once before, 3 summers ago for a family thing. I remembered the long gravel driveway, the fence line, the old oak tree at the edge of the yard. What I didn't remember was the lights on at that hour. Not house lights, work lights, the kind on a portable flood stand, the orange industrial kind, pointed out toward the far side of the property where the barn was. I parked on the road and got out of my truck. I heard it before I saw anything. A rhythmic, dull sound, hollow and heavy at the same time. I walked the fence line toward it, and when I came around the corner of the barn, I saw my daughter. She was splitting wood. Not like someone doing a chore, like someone who had been doing it for a long time. Her movements were mechanical. Arms up, axe down, step, reset. She was wearing an old flannel shirt that wasn't hers, and her hair was pulled back, and her arms looked, I don't know how to say this right, they looked different. Leaner than I remembered. She'd lost weight. I said her name. She spun around so fast she almost dropped the axe. For a second, she just stared at me. And the look on her face was not the look of a teenager surprised to see her dad. It was something older than that. Something that had gotten used to things not going the way it was supposed to. Then she said, "Dad." Just that. And then she started crying. I crossed the yard in about 4 steps and she dropped the axe handle and I put my arms around her and she was shaking. This trembling that went all through her, and I could feel how much thinner she was than 11 weeks ago. I could feel her shoulder blades too clearly. I asked her if she was okay. She said yes. Then she said no. Then she just held on. I asked her what was going on. She pulled back and wiped her face with the sleeve of the flannel shirt and took a breath like she was deciding where to start. She said Roberta had put her to work the first week she arrived. Garden work, she said. Which was fine. Lena didn't mind that. But it hadn't stopped at the garden. It had expanded, a little at a time, so gradually Lena hadn't known exactly when it changed from helping out to something else. Feeding the chickens before 6 in the morning, hauling water, mending fences, splitting wood for the stove even though it was summer, because Roberta sold bundled firewood to campers at a state park about 12 miles away, and she needed it ready before September. She sold it? I said. Lena nodded. I asked about food. She said they ate fine. She wasn't starved. But the portions were small and she was doing physical labor all day and she was always hungry and too tired to think clearly by the end of the day. I asked about her phone. She said Roberta had taken it the second week, said it was a distraction. Said kids Lena's age needed to be away from screens. She was allowed to use the landline. The house had one, but only on Sundays, and Roberta was always nearby when she used it. And something about that made Lena not say the things she wanted to say. She told me she'd written me a letter. 2 letters, actually. I hadn't gotten any letters. I stood there in the dark next to my daughter, next to the pile of split wood and the floodlight humming overhead, and I had this very specific thought. I should have been home, not in some dramatic, punishing way. Just simply, I should have been home more. I should have called more. I should have asked more questions before I flew back offshore. But I was here now. I told Lena to get whatever she had inside. Just her things, as much as she could carry. We were leaving. She went quiet for a second. Then she said, "She's going to hear me." I said that was fine. She said, "Dad, she's going to say things. She'll wake up and she'll have a lot to say." I said I was counting on it. Lena went inside. I stood on the porch and waited. The night was warm and full of crickets and I could smell something, hay maybe, coming off the field. I was very calm in a way that sometimes happens to me when something is genuinely wrong. Like all the noise in my head just drops out and I can see exactly what needs to happen next. Roberta came out about 8 minutes later. She had a robe on and she was already talking before she was fully through the door. She said Lena had agreed to stay. She said Lena was learning responsibility. She said I had no idea what was good for my own child and that Lena had been struggling before this summer. Her word, struggling, and that hard work was the best thing for her. And what kind of father was I anyway, away from months at a time, letting my wife make all the decisions? I let her finish. Then I said, "Did you take her phone?" Roberta said the phone was a problem. I said, "Did you take it?" She said she put it away for safekeeping. I said, "I want it back." She said she didn't see why she needed to. I said, "Roberta, she's 16? She's my daughter. She hasn't called me in 10 days. She's been out here splitting wood at 1 in the morning. I'm not asking you to explain your philosophy. I'm telling you I'm leaving with my daughter and I need her phone." Roberta shifted her weight. She changed her tone then, went from loud to something almost reasonable, which I trusted even less. She said there was no need to make this into something it wasn't. She said she'd been doing us a favor. She said we should all talk about it in the morning, get some sleep, sit down calmly. My daughter came out with a backpack and a paper grocery bag and she stood next to me and I put my hand on her shoulder. I said, "The phone." Roberta went inside and came back with it. The screen was cracked in a way it hadn't been when Lena left. I didn't say anything about that. We walked to the truck. I had Lena get in. I walked around to my side. Roberta was standing on the porch saying something about ingratitude and about how she'd given up her summer and about how I was making a mistake. I started the truck. I found a motel in the next town over, got a room with 2 beds, and by 2:30 in the morning, Lena was asleep with the lights still on. I sat in the chair by the window and charged her phone, and when it came on, I saw the notifications. Texts she'd tried to send. A few to me, a few to her mother. They'd never gone through. No signal out there, apparently, or the phone had been off. I scrolled through them. They weren't panicked. They weren't dramatic. That was almost the hardest part. They were just steady, quiet, practical messages from my daughter telling us she was okay, she was working hard, she missed us. Could someone please come get her? 3 months of those messages sitting in an outbox, undelivered. On the drive back the next morning, I kept quiet for the first hour and let Lena sleep. When she woke up, we stopped at a Cracker Barrel outside of Murfreesboro. She ate more at that breakfast than I think I'd seen her eat in one sitting in years. Scrambled eggs and biscuits and gravy and a side of fruit, and she drank 2 glasses of orange juice. I watched her eat, and I didn't say anything about it. And she looked up at one point and caught me looking and said, I was really hungry. I said I knew. I asked her when she was ready to tell me everything. She did, all of it. The way it started gradually, the garden work that turned into farm labor, the phone disappearing, the Sundays on the landline with Roberta right there, the wood splitting, which had started as a one-time thing and become daily, the 2 girls from a neighboring property who sometimes came over, Roberta's friends' kids, who also worked but who got to go home at the end of the day. The way Lena had started to feel like she was the one who'd done something wrong, somehow, like she deserved this. That was the part that got me most. She said, I kept thinking, maybe Dad knows. Maybe he knows and he thinks this is good for me. Maybe Mom knows. Maybe everyone agreed this was what I needed, and maybe I was just being weak. I had to look out the window for a second. Then I said, no one knew. And even if we had, it wouldn't have been okay. None of it was okay. You understand that? She nodded. She nodded. I said, you weren't weak. You handled something hard, and you kept your head, and you're sitting here, and you're going home. She looked down at her plate. Then she said, the letters. I wrote 2 letters. Did you not get them? I hadn't. Either they were still at the house, or Roberta had never mailed them. To this day, I don't know which. When we got home, my wife met us at the door. She and Lena held each other for a long time. I let them have that. I stood back and let them have it. Later that evening, after Lena was settled, my wife and I sat at the kitchen table and talked for a long time. Not fighting. Just talking, the way you have to talk when something like this happens and you both know you share some piece of the responsibility. She hadn't known it was this bad. She genuinely hadn't, but she'd also known something felt off, and she hadn't pushed hard enough on it, and she knew that. I'd been offshore and unreachable for weeks at a time, and I hadn't set up a system where someone else was checking in on my daughter. And I knew that. We both said the things that needed to be said, and neither one of us made it about ourselves. The next morning, I called my brother-in-law, Roberta's husband, a decent man named Walt who I'd always liked, and told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he was sorry. He said he hadn't known the extent of it. He said he'd known Lena was helping with chores, but not like that. Not daily, not before sunrise, not the wood. He said he'd talked to Roberta. I said talking might not be the thing. I had already spoken to an attorney friend of mine, a guy I've known since college, who does family law out of Knoxville. He listened to everything I told him and said what Roberta had done likely constituted child labor under Tennessee law. Not some technical edge case, but a real legal exposure. Especially given that she was profiting from the firewood Lena helped produce and was not the child's legal guardian. He said I should document everything and consider filing a complaint with the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. I filed the complaint. A DCS worker came out to Roberta's property 2 weeks later. I don't know everything that happened in that visit. What I know is that Roberta had 2 other children on the property that summer, the girls from the neighboring family I mentioned, and that the investigation expanded beyond just Lena. I know that Walt and Roberta separated within the month. I know that the firewood operation shut down. I know that there were findings from the investigation, findings I won't detail here because some of it is still tied up in legal proceedings, but findings that validated everything Lena had told me in that Cracker Barrel in Murfreesboro. I also know that Lena started junior year late, 2 weeks late. Her school worked with us on it. Her teachers were kind. She caught up fast. She's a smart kid, always has been. But for the first month or so, she'd come home and go straight to her room and stay there. And I'd knock on the door, and sometimes she wanted to talk, and sometimes she didn't, and I let her make that call. There was one afternoon in October. I'd taken a shorter rotation that fall, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, different from the usual. and I was home more than I had been in years. I was in the garage fixing something on the truck, I don't remember what, and Lena came out and sat on the workbench and didn't say anything for a while. We just existed in the same space. Then she said, "Did Aunt Roberta ever think about me? Like, do you think she thought about what it was like for me?" I put down what I was holding. I thought about it honestly, the way she deserved. I said I thought Roberta had probably told herself a story in which what she was doing was fine. The people who do things like that usually have a version of the story where they're the one doing a favor, providing discipline, building character, whatever word they want to use. I said I didn't think Roberta sat in the dark hating my daughter. I said I thought it was something quieter and worse than that. I thought Roberta had just decided that Lena's discomfort didn't matter as much as the things Roberta wanted. And that was the whole thing. That was all of it. Lena sat with that for a minute. Then she nodded, slowly, like she was filing it somewhere. She said, "I want to be someone who thinks about what it's like for other people." I said, "You already are. You've always been that." She got up and went back inside, and I stood in the garage for a long time after that. I've been in the Gulf for a lot of years. The job pays well. It's allowed us to have a house and take vacations and put money away and give Lena options. I don't regret the career, but I've also made my peace with the fact that being offshore for months at a time means I'm not there for things, and some of those things matter, and you don't always know which things matter until later, when the damage has already been done, and the most you can do is sit across from your daughter at a Cracker Barrel while she eats her first real breakfast in weeks, and look out the window and breathe. The rotation schedule is different now. Shorter cycles, home more often. I won't pretend that's pure sacrifice on my part. The company offered the option, and I took it. But I took it because of that August. Because of a floodlight humming over a woodpile at 1 in the morning. Because of undelivered text messages sitting in my daughter's outbox for 3 months. Lena is 17 now. She's in her school's drama program, which I did not see coming. But she's apparently very good. She did a one-act play in November, and I sat in the third row and watched her, and I thought, there she is, the person she was supposed to be this whole time, just getting the chance to be it. When it was over, she found me in the hallway and she said, "You didn't fall asleep." I said, "I did not." She said, "Dad, you literally cried." I said I had something in my eye. She laughed, and it was the laugh I remembered from before that summer, and I thought, okay, we're going to be okay. There's an image I keep coming back to. Not the floodlight over the woodpile, not Roberta on the porch in her robe. It's simpler than that. It's Lena's outbox, 3 months of messages she'd typed out in the dark, trying to reach us, and every single one of them just sitting there, delivered to no one, seen by no one, waiting. She didn't panic. She didn't fall apart. She kept her head down and she kept trying, and when the trying didn't work, she adapted and she survived and she held herself together until I came through that fence line. That's not something I taught her. That's something that was already in her. But I almost didn't recognize it because I hadn't been close enough, long enough, to see it clearly. What Roberta did had a logic to it, the way selfish things usually do. She needed labor. Lena was available, the story Roberta told herself, that hard work builds character, that kids today are too soft, that she was doing us a favor. That story let her sleep fine. And that's the thing about people who cause harm quietly. They rarely think of themselves as causing harm. They've just decided that someone else's discomfort is an acceptable cost for their own convenience. No dramatic cruelty required. Just a steady, daily choice to look away from what they're actually doing. That choice had consequences, not because the universe arranged it that way, but because actions leave evidence. Lena lost weight. Messages went undelivered. An investigation expanded to other children on that property. Walt saw what he hadn't let himself see before. The firewood operation shut down. Every one of those outcomes traced back directly to what Roberta had decided, day after day, was acceptable. That's how it works. Not always fast, not always loudly, but eventually the shape of what you've done becomes visible to everyone, including people with the authority to write it down on official documents. I've thought a lot about my own piece of this. I was gone 11 weeks. I had a system for checking in that depended entirely on Lina initiating contact. And when she couldn't, the system failed completely and I didn't notice for 10 days. That's on me. Not on the offshore schedule, not on my wife, not on bad cell signal in rural Tennessee. On me. A smarter version of myself would have built in redundancy. Would have had a third person, a neighbor, a friend, someone whose job was to physically see my daughter every couple of weeks and report back. I didn't do that. I trusted the arrangement without verifying it, and trust without verification is just hope with a better name. What I know now is that being a decent person isn't something you establish once and then coast on. It's something you have to keep doing, keep choosing, keep showing up for. Lena showed me that. She had every reason to fall apart in those 11 weeks. Scared, isolated, cut off, working before sunrise, and instead she wrote letters, she adapted, she kept her dignity intact. That takes something real. It takes knowing who you are, clearly enough that even when someone is trying to rewrite the story of you, your dad gave you away. Your dad doesn't want you. You don't fully believe it. You hold a thread back to yourself. I want to be someone worthy of the trust she held on to, even when she had no evidence she should. That's the thing that stays with me. Not the anger at Roberta. Not the paperwork, the investigation, the legal language. Just that, my daughter held on to the belief that I would come. And I did, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time making sure that if she ever needs me to come again, I'm already close enough that the drive is short.